Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kayla and this video is going to be my top 10-ish favorite books of 2023. Yes, it is probably, by the time I get this edited and posted, February or the last couple days of January, which is not 2023. But and I was really going to be so much better and get this up, and I've been literally sick like all of January. I've had a sinus infection. It has been an absolute disaster. So I have barely been able to talk without like coughing. Still a little bit under the weather, but like so much better. I can actually like speak for more than 5 minutes without dying. Yeah, so I figure I'm open to watching anybody's top 10 favorite books of a year whenever they want to do it. So hopefully you all feel the same way. So first I'm going to start with some kind of like honorable mentions that are in categories, most of which I don't like own physical copies of. I don't own physical copies of most of my top 10. I'm a big library and audiobook person in general. But for the honorable mentions, they're kind of categories, I guess. Like, so the first category is my favorite, like, there will be repeats of some of these categories in the top 10, but you know, one of my favorite mystery thrillers is The Man Who Died Twice by Richard Osman, which is the second book in the Thursday Murder Club. I can remember the name of the series, and I read this I think at the very beginning of the year, and I just really enjoy it. I just really love the way he writes, and I felt like this book, like, while the mystery itself wasn't quite as good in some ways, like, as the first one, I felt like I really loved the character work and their relationships and all that. I'm always going to love them. I really want to get through the third and the fourth book in the next couple months, but there's such a long wait for the audiobook in my library, so who knows. But I just really like this. I always want to recommend this series to anyone who likes kind of a cozy mystery, anything. If you like Agatha Christie, I think you'll like this vibe. If you like books about older characters in general, I think you'll like these. They're just really nice and they're really happy, and I just love these characters, and I can't believe, I think the series is over or something. I don't know, but trying to pretend that's not true. The next category is graphic novels, which I don't read a lot of, but this past year, I've been trying to read more, and I read I haven't read the third one yet. I read Sheets and Delicates by Brenna Thumler, which follow this girl who she recently lost her mother, and she owns, like, her family owns like a laundromat, so it kind of is following that. Like, she's like 13 and kind of ends up almost in charge of this laundromat or dry cleaning service or whatever it is, and because her dad is kind of unable to cope after the death of her mother, and then the other main character is a ghost, like a sheet, and it's about their friendship. And the second book brings in another character who I absolutely adore, and their friendship is so sweet, and I just really enjoyed it. I read it, I want to say in like February of last year when I was really struggling, and it just was like a warm, cozy hug. So I'll probably end up picking up the next one in February, because February kind of sucks, and that will be great. But yeah, that is definitely a great place to start, I think, if you're looking for kind of like cozy graphic novels. Then my favorite classic that I read, which is also, I think, the only classic I read and finished, was, and this is kind of, this book and the next book I'm going to talk about are kind of like surprises also. They're not necessarily like top 10 favorites, but they were books that I didn't expect to love, and I did. So this classic is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which I read reading books that like inspired Taylor Swift songs, and I want to say the first like 30% of it 30 to 50% of it, I hated it. Like, I didn't hate it. It was very well written, very beautiful. But the main character, I just wanted to throttle her. She's like 22 and I'm in my 30s, and just the way she dealt with everything was so insane. And then the book just turns into something that I did not expect it to be, and gets so unhinged in this way that I was just obsessed with. And I love it, and I want to reread it, like, because I listened to it as an audiobook. I want to reread it like as a physical copy and maybe like annotate it and everything. I think that because was written, I want to say in like the 20s or 30s, it's a lot more like accessible as a classic. It's not quite as, I struggle sometimes with like the old timey kind of writing and talking. It doesn't feel conversational. I can't get in the flow of it. So this I found very easy for that, and I thought it went totally unhinged, and I had a great time. And yeah, I think you just kind of gotta push through the setup of all of it, where you're just like, she's an idiot, why did she marry this 40-year-old man, like, this is stupid, to get to like the insanity of it all. And I love that. And then what I will say is like the absolute biggest surprise of 2023 for me, and a book that I rated 5 stars when I was like expecting, if I ever read this book, it's gonna be like a 2-star, was A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. And I didn't read the first one because I watched Carrie Can Read do like a recap of it, so I was like, well, I kind of know everything anyway, and I knew that like the love interest changes, so I was like, I don't want to get attached to this guy in the first book and then have the love interest change and like feel like I wasted my time. Yeah, so I just started with A Court of Mist and Fury, which everybody says is their favorite anyway, so whatever. I might at some point, when I finish all the other ones, go back and read A Court of Thorns and Roses once like I'm done and want more. I don't know. But yeah, I can't really explain what it's all about because it's the second book, but I'm sure if you are on BookTube in any way, you know that it follows Feyre, who she's like human, and in the first book she like accidentally kills a fairy who's like disguised as a wolf, and then ends up getting kidnapped and has to go be a prisoner to Tamlin. And then the second book is about her relationship with like Rysand and the Night Court, and the writing is good, and the world building is fine. But what Sarah J. Maas really excels at is just like characters and relationships. Like, I was obsessed with all of the characters in the Night Court. Rysand is obviously, you know, tall, dark, and handsome, like the classic romance novel hero, and I really just loved everybody. Their chemistry was insane. Like, by the time they sleep together, you're like, finally. And like, I don't care about smut, so like for me to be like finally, like that means that like the sexual tension was like bonkers. And my favorite character is Feyre, because personally I read that when I was going through a really hard time, and just the depictions of like her PTSD and her trauma and her depression and everything just felt really real, and watching her like find her own strength and all that was really inspiring and really helpful for me at that time. So yeah. And then this one is like, if I was doing a top 11, this would be there. So this is my total first honorable mention, Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. It's the sequel to Ninth House, and which follows Alex Stern as she is like at Yale, and she's this member of this secret society whose job it is to like keep the other secret societies in line, because like ghosts and magic and shit are real, and Alex can see ghosts, and everything goes completely insane. And Ninth House, I just feel like, is such just like a perfect like dark academia fantasy kind of book. And then this book, I really want to reread both of them before whenever the third one comes out, because at the time I was like, I think I like Ninth House better, but then the more I reflect on this, I'm like, I think I might on a reread like this one more when I know where it's going, because there was a lot of stuff in here, like flashbacks and little side plots that I didn't think were important, and then you get to the end and they're relevant and important. So I'm like, I was like kind of hating on those the whole time I was reading it, but I think that I would appreciate them more as it went on. And I loved the characters in this. We got more time with some of my favorite characters, and yeah, I'm honestly like, why isn't this in my top 10? But I read a lot of books. And yeah, so actually I read 61 books this year. My goal was originally 75, and then I went into a pretty big reading slump in like September and lowered it to 60. So I hit my modified reading goal, and then these are 10 of my favorites there. The top like 3, yeah, the top like 3 to 5 are definitely in order, but then kind of after that it could go in any order. And there's a decent mix of fiction and nonfiction and all sorts of different genres, because I am diverse and fun. Number 10 is Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. This is kind of a weird one. I was, again, debating between Hellbent and this, but I went with this because Rilke is my favorite poet. I read the Duino Elegies when I was in college, and I read some other bits and pieces of poetry throughout my life. And I've kind of been putting this off because I knew that it was gonna be something. Like, there was gonna be a moment where like this was the book. And I read it, I wanna say in August, and that was the right time. And it was absolutely incredible. I tried, at one point I was like, I have to try and annotate this, and I did some highlighting, and like, it has one of my favorite quotes of all time, which I will read right now because it is that good. How could we forget those old myths found at the origin of the history of all peoples, the myths about dragons that transform at the last possible moment into princesses? Perhaps all the dragons in our life are princesses who are only waiting for the one moment where we are beautiful and courageous. Perhaps everything terrible is at bottom all that is helpless, waiting for our help. So yeah, it's just really, really powerful. It's just letters between, it's all the letters that Rilke sent to this young poet. Like, you don't have his responses, but like Rilke's like the famous one. This poet, I guess, wasn't famous. And yeah, it's just 10 letters, and you can read it kind of slowly, and I recommend kind of reading it slowly and really absorbing it all. And yeah, I feel like they really just hit, and this is going to be one of those books that I think I'm going to come back to over and over again, and at different points in my life, and things are going to mean different things. Then number 9 is, honestly, I never would have expected a horror book to be in my top 10 favorite books, but number 9 is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I read this in September, mostly through the audiobook, and I absolutely loved it. I think sometimes that when you're kind of trying out a new genre, the first book that you really love in that genre is going to become one of your favorites, you know, like it's just inevitable. So it follows the story of this book club, the Southern Book Club. Basically, it's just about like moms and motherhood, and I think if you're going into it looking for like a fun vampire story, that element is going to be lacking. But if you're going into it looking for, I mean, I think it's all well done, but like if you're going into it looking for like a story about like womanhood and motherhood especially, and the way that moms kind of rock. Like, that's such like a cliche thing to say, but like it's all about these parents, like these moms who are just like step up when like kids in their community are like in danger. And it also touches on how like black kids can disappear and nobody cares, and like this white woman is like, I care, and the black people are kind of like, took you long enough, and like they kind of abandon when it gets hard. It's like, well, okay, that was too hard, but then when their kids need help, you know. So it touches on that, and it's just about this mom who, she just kind of starts out being like a meek little housewife, and everything that happens turns her into a badass, and I just really enjoyed it. It was scary but never too far because I'm a little bit of a baby. It was gory but never too far. It was funny. It was heartwarming. It made me cry. I really loved it, and I'm really excited to read more Grady Hendrix. I know that like his stuff, it seems like everybody likes every other book. It's like so mixed. So I own Final Girl Support Group, so I might just do that next because I already own it, even though I don't think that's one of the favorites. But yeah, I really loved it, and Grady Hendrix is a really good writer. So yeah, that was my number 9. Then 8 is a nonfiction. It is Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Davis. I don't remember when I read this, but I listened to an audiobook, which was really good because she narrates it. It's basically just a collection of essays, which I think is kind of an easier way to absorb the information, because it's a lot of stuff that some of it I had known about and thought about before, and some of it was definitely new. It's a lot about prison abolition and like the links between like the prison abolitionist movement here and apartheid South Africa and the Palestinian struggle, so it's very relevant right now. And I would definitely recommend, like, if you're looking for books about that, especially if you already care about prison abolition or the Black Lives Matter movement or whatever in America, and you're trying to get some more emotional connections or whatever to what is going on in Palestine right now, that this is like a really good place to start, because you understand how segregation and apartheid and racism and all of that around the world is like really connected. And she's just an incredible writer, and there's a reason that she is who she is and such like a icon in this kind of activism, intersectional feminist, abolition, Black Lives Matter, that whole world. She's just like who she is because of this. Some of the essays were some of it can be a little repetitive, but if you have less knowledge on some of the topics than I do, then it might not feel as repetitive. I can only view it through my own lens, where I've been, especially with Palestine, very aware and passionate about what's been going on for a while. So yeah, but I definitely recommend it right now and always, and I can't wait to read more stuff by Angela Davis and learn more. And number 7 is Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie, so you probably know what that is. That is a very classic Agatha Christie Poirot mystery about a murder on the Orient Express. I know, groundbreaking. But it's basically the train gets stopped in a snowstorm, there's a murder, so there's like 10 people who it could have been, and the book is told in interviews of Poirot interviewing all of these people, all these suspects, and it's just very classic, like figuring out who's lying and going all these things, and so much of the evidence is just like the things they say, or like their passport, or just basic little tiny pieces of information, and it is incredible. I didn't know like the solution. I've never seen any of the movies about it, and it absolutely like blew my mind, which is crazy because I feel like once I like finished it, I was like, I feel like that's kind of like a pop culture thing that I should have been aware of. But yeah, I just really loved it. It was just so classic, perfectly Poirot doing his perfect thing, and I felt like I was solving it with him. I had some ideas. I felt like I was in the interrogation room, and the characters were so good. Like, she has a lot of types of characters she revisits, and I felt like in a lot of ways these were like the epitome of them, whereas when I read, say, like Death on the Nile, I felt like they were kind of like the crappy versions of these types of characters, you know? And I know that's a pretty famous and popular one as well, a lot of people's favorite, but I think Murder on the Orient Express by far the best. I don't know if it's one that I would recommend like starting with because it is so good. Like I haven't read I read Halloween Party, but I barely read an Agatha Christie since then because I was like, it's not even gonna live up to it. But I do also think that it's like a good one to start with because it is what it is, you know? So I love that. I will always love Agatha Christie and Poirot. Then number 6 is You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akwaeke Emezi, which is something I've been wanting to read for a long time, and I've heard incredible things about Akwaeke Emezi as an author and wanting to read something by them, and this one was so beautiful, so beautifully written. It follows I want to say she's in her late 20s, Faye. She is kind of just starting to date after the death of her, I can't remember if he's her fiance or her husband, but her partner. And she's just starting to date, and she finds this guy who's like okay, but she's not like, I don't know, she's not like madly into him or whatever, and she ends up meeting his father, and they have like a connection, which I am not like I don't like age gap romances. I don't like any of that stuff. So I was kind of like, am I gonna like this? And it blew me away. Like Faye was an incredible character. Yeah, all the characters are just incredible, and the writing is like poetry, and the whole book is really just about grief and coping with loss and the importance kind of finding yourself after loss. Like there's obviously a love story, and that's great, but the love story is only possible because she kind of falls back in love with herself also. So I thought that was really good, and I loved it. And I think it's like a controversial one. Some people don't really connect with it, but I absolutely did. Then number 5 is another nonfiction. I think it's my last nonfiction, and that is They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us by Hanif Abdurraqib. This is a collection. I listened to it on audiobook, but it is a collection of essays. Hanif is a poet and a music journalist, so it's all sorts of collections of some things that have already been published of his music journalism, a lot of things that haven't, some poetry, really beautiful things about music. There's a little bit about like sports in here, which like I'm not a sports person at all, and those parts were still incredible. I am very much a music person, so that was my absolute favorite part. There's stuff about Fall Out Boy, which is one of my favorite bands of all time. There's just, yeah, a lot of really great stuff. Yeah, Chance the Rapper, Bruce Springsteen, Carly Rae Jepsen, and I really loved it. It's about blackness and community and music and death. There's some trigger warnings for suicide and stuff like that, but I found it very beautiful, very impactful, and he's such an incredible writer. He's written other books that are about things that I don't really care about. Like I think he either just came out or is coming out with one that's about like basketball, and he has one that's about a tribe called Quest, I believe, which is not really music I listen to, but his writing is so good that I'm like, I think I'm gonna have to read it anyway. And I love an essay collection because you can kind of take it in chunks or devour it all. I kind of devoured it. But yeah, I really recommend this. I really loved it. I just think that he's one of the greatest writers alive right now, legitimately. Like, then I'm cheating a little bit for number 4 because they can't be separated, but Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. If I had, like, gun to my head, had to pick one, it would be Crooked Kingdom, but they're both incredible. They are in the Grishaverse, which is like Shadow and Bone, but in a very different way. The Grishaverse, like the Shadow and Bone trilogy, It's right behind me. It's very like magic focused. It's that special chosen girl with her special magic powers, you know? It's that. And absolutely loved it. She's the love of my life. But this is a lot more like gritty, and some of these characters have magic powers, but the main character, Kaz, doesn't. And it just takes place kind of in a Victorian Amsterdam, kind of, and they're all criminals, and it's a heist novel, and you get introduced to the most incredible characters ever. It says, a convict with thirst for revenge, a sharpshooter who can't walk away from a wager, a runaway with a privileged past, a spy known as the Wraith, a heartrender using her magic to survive the slums, a thief with a gift for unlikely escapes. And like, it's incredible. It's found family. There's romance, but like they're all like slow burn or like different perfect tropes done so perfectly. And then this one like is like getting the gang together and then doing the heist. And then this one is like the stakes go through the freaking roof, and there's a lot more like of the 6 of them together. So I think that's why I really love this one, because they spend more time together, and it went in directions that I never could have expected. Absolutely sobbed like a baby through like the last quarter of it. I cannot recommend this more. I think that you can read them without reading Shadow and Bone, and I would definitely recommend, if you're like, well, maybe I can get an idea of Shadow and Bone plot-wise by watching the show, I would definitely recommend not doing that, because their plot line in season 2 is very similar to this. Just one of there's like 6 heists in this book. One of the heists in this book is very similar to their season 2 plot line, and you don't want to be spoiled for that. So I just go into it. I just Google what a Grisha is, and then just go into it, you know? Like, I absolutely love it. She's an auto-buy author for me with Hellbent and Shadow and Bone, and especially these. And these are my family. I was literally reading them this time last year, and they got me through a really hard time, and I cannot believe the show is canceled and you don't get to see more of them. And I'll never forgive Netflix for that. Yeah, read this. It's fantasy, but like accessible, so much more. Yeah. And number 3 is Chlorine by Jade Song, which follows, I read this in the summer. I listened to it on audiobook and then immediately ordered a physical copy because I was like, I need to own this and I need to probably reread it at some point. This follows a 13-year-old girl and her story to become a mermaid. Like literally, there's some like literal like body horror speculative elements of her becoming a mermaid or trying to become a mermaid or whatever, but really it is about girlhood, and it's queer and friendship, and there's like stuff about like the patriarchy and rape culture and all sorts of incredible things about that. It is twisted and dark and weird and gruesome and so oddly relatable at points, and her writing is incredible. I will be following her and picking up anything else she writes. This is a debut, like, and it's incredible. Like, yeah, it says it's about love and longing and the willingness to do anything to become who you truly are. And is that not what being a teenage girl, a teenager who's been socialized as a woman, isn't that all that is about for all of us, whether you want to be a mermaid or just survive high school, you know? Then number 2, we're getting, these are for sure my top 2. Like, these are fighting for number 1. Number 2 is Notes on Execution by Dania Kukafka. This is incredible. Like, better than I could have imagined. Like, I knew it was going to be good. It was on a lot of people who I really like agree with their taste and respect their taste their best books list last year, and it is so good. It follows a serial killer who is on death row, and then it also follows like his victims and the like people related to his victims and the cop who like ended up like taking him down and stuff like that. And it just really, really like gets in your head. It's so psychological. You're at points feeling bad for this man who's like a murderer, and then at points you hate him, and then like I disagree with the death penalty, so I was like, well, I don't believe that he should die. But then like you hear these people talking about like their dead loved ones, I'm like, he should die, you know? And like I'm crying and I'm feeling so awful for these people. I did like do a little annotating because there were just a lot of recurring themes of like life choices, and if one thing had gone differently, like how your life would have turned out, and were you like fated to be like this, or was it a choice? And yeah, I found, especially you get chapters from like his mother's point of view, and I found those were some of the kind of most intense as far as that. And yeah, I really loved it. I think some people really struggle with like being in the serial killer's head element of it, so like you got to be prepared for that, and with like the trigger warnings there. But if you can get past that and understand that like you're not supposed to be like rooting for him, you know, then I think it is absolutely worth reading and will make you think a lot. I loved it. And then my number one book of the year, I read this in February of last year, and I was like, as I was reading Notes on an Execution, I was like, this might, but I think that because of when I read this book, nothing could top it, and that is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This follows a married couple, Leah and Miri, and Leah was like a marine biologist. She went into an expedition, and the submarine or whatever got like stuck at the bottom of the ocean for 6 months. And then Miri is like her wife who was left behind. And in Leah's chapters, you follow her like when she's in the submarine, and Miri's chapters are all about when Leah comes back and she's different. And it's kind of speculative, kind of horror, kind of sci-fi, but it is 100% just about grief and love and loss. And yeah, this is another one that I checked out from the library and then bought it pretty quickly. And the writing is beautiful, it's queer, which I love, and if you've ever lost anyone, especially to something that is kind of wasting and takes them away from you bit by bit, this will really, really hit. And yeah, it's not, don't look for, some people are disappointed in it because I think they're looking for a horror book or for answers, and you are not going to get any of that. It is not about what happened to Leah under the water. It is not about what happens to her at the end of the book. It is about the way they love each other and what loss is, and you know, grief is love persevering. So that is my top 10 plus some honorable mentions plus a lot of rambling favorite books of 2023. Yeah, I had a pretty good reading year despite some real emotional turmoil at the beginning of the year and then some pretty big reading slumps at the end. I'm very happy with it. I'm hoping that this year will be better. January hasn't been great because of the being sick. Like I finished one book so far. I'm gonna finish another one. I'm like 80% through another one. I'm gonna finish it. Yeah, but I'm still optimistic about this year. My reading goal for this year is 52 books, which is how many weeks there are in a year, and I'm like, I can read a book a week. Like, let's do that. And yeah, it was really good reading year. If you've read any of these and loved them, let me know. If you've read any of them and hated them, don't let me know. and tell me what your favorite book of the year was. And I'm actually going to reply to comments and bulk film some stuff right now where I'm feeling better. So thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, comment. I'm trying to get back into this, so anything you can do to help motivate me to feel back at home on BookTube will be much appreciated. Thank you so much.